Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Stuart Dauermann, as you know, and with me is Dr. Bruce Stokes. You know who I am, most of you do. Bruce, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself a bit to the people, please?
Okay, well, I'm a professor of anthropology and behavioral sciences at California Baptist University. I was the founding dean at the school there. And I'm also pastor of the Disciple Center, which is a Judeo-Christian congregation affiliated with the Messianic Movement and the Southern Baptist Convention. And been trying to work on this with Dr. Dauermann for quite a while now.
And how long have you been interested in the kinds of smaller groups that you and I have committed to? How long has this been an interest of yours?
Well, I started out in the 60s in the Youth for Christ movement. I was in the parachurch world, and I developed out of a parachurch group a house church during the time of the 67, 68. And then later created a house church for people who had to work weekends so they couldn't go to regular churches. That was quite successful. Then went into normal pastoral ministry. Right now I'm trying to work my congregation from a congregation more into CHavurah type systems so that they're able to function in situations like COVID, or if we would have to deal with persecution or economic hardship. So I've been involved in this since the 60s.
One of the things you might all want to realize is that Bruce and I have partnered together because we both have a passion for this. I helped to found a house church actually in the Bronx that still exists called the Bronx Household of Faith. And that was in the 60s also. But in terms of what we're interested in, I'm concentrating on the fundamentally Jewish expressions of this kind of a group, of these CHavurah. And Bruce is functioning to mentor groups that are from the Christian world that want to preserve their rootedness in Christian tradition and history, while having a very strong sense of indebtedness and connectedness to the Jewish world. So he's concentrating, you might say, on the house church side of things. I'm concentrating on the CHavurah side of things, but these things overlap and we work together. So let's go and explain some of the things we're up to. So first of all, why Chai? Why do we have this organization? Then we're going to look at what are we supposed to be doing with these groups that we're talking about. Thirdly, what are the fundamental nature of such groups? And fourth, we have 5 bridges to a better tomorrow. These are the four goals that we want to solve tonight, that we want to approach tonight. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to take you deeper into this. Just hold on one second. And the first thing we'll look at is why Chai? So here you are. Chai, the CHavurah Action Initiative. Okay, this is pretty obvious. Chai, of course, is a term for life. It's a well-known term. It's has positive connotations. In Jewish life, Chai, of course, refers to life in its fullness of blessing, what we've all come to think of as the more abundant life. That's Chai. It's a good name. But it's also an acronym, the CHavurah Action Initiative. So let's look at that acronym for a moment. First of all, CHavurah Action Initiative. What is a CHavurah? Well, here, CHavurah, this is the relational table fellowships that were originally designed and devised by the Pharisees and adopted and adapted by Yeshua believers until the 4th century. In Christian context, these are called house churches or home churches. Most people have never really bothered to think of the fact that for the first, until the 4th century, all Yeshua believing groups were home fellowships. They all were. They didn't have cathedrals. They didn't have church buildings. People met in homes. Most of the early believers were slaves. They met in apartments. And those apartments, they were called insulae, and these were small. And so these house churches served maybe a dozen people if you were lucky, maybe 14 or 15, that's about it. And wealthy people like Erastus in Rome, they had homes that were called a domus, as in the word domicile. Their homes, if you moved things around, you could, in the atrium, you could have about 40 people. But that's about the size of these groups. And so the CHavurah Action Initiative, CHavurah is these small home fellowships, it's what we call familial spirituality. Secondly is action groups. We're not talking heads. We're not a study group. We're looking for an expression of familial spirituality, the body nature of the people of God gathered together. And we call it an action group because we want to be engaged in taking action suited to the times. Like the children of Issachar, it says in 2 Chronicles that the children of Issachar were those who had an understanding of the times to know what Israel ought to do. We believe that this CHavurah model is something which is suited to the times. So a CHavurah, we want to take action and we want to take initiative. We're responding to a sense of call, and we believe this is a means of spiritual renewal. Here's something interesting. It's an interesting quote from Steve Jobs. He says, most people never pick up the phone. Most people never call and ask. He's talking about entrepreneurial projects. And that's what separates sometimes the people who do things from those who just dream about them. You got to act. You got to be willing to fail. You got to be willing to crash and burn with people on the phone or starting a company. If you're afraid you'll fail, you won't get very far. So Bruce and I, it's not like we're the great gurus and we have the great master plan and the world can't survive without us. We just have a sense of call that we've got to do something, and we're going to go for it. And we believe it's a means of spiritual renewal. In Fuller Seminary, there's one of my professors there was Paul Pearson. Paul Pearson is a church historian, PhD from Princeton, and he's an expert in church renewal. And he had 10 principles of church renewal. And I won't read all of this to you, but it occurred to me that 5 or 6 of these principles apply to what we're trying to do. He said that renewal and expansion happen when the historical or contextual conditions are right. And Bruce, do you mind commenting on why you think that the time is ripe for us to investigate this kind of home church CHavurah model?
Well, I think 2 things. One, the current circumstances that we're in with the COVID has required people to spend more time at home and really rediscover what household means. And then in addition to that, as people have been isolated, a lot of them have begun to bring a few friends into their home or meet in their backyard. So they're already engaging in those dynamics because the COVID has really given us that as a catalyst. But I also think that there is a a real hunger in believers to be in a relational network and not just sitting in a pew facing the same direction, minimally participating. They want to be in a relational context where they're actually doers of the word and not just hearers.
Right. Thank you very much. Okay, let's look a little further. Secondly, he said renewal and expansion are often accompanied by theological breakthroughs, and also renewal and expansion are accompanied by new spiritual dynamics or recontextualized forms of spirituality. That includes rediscovering models that have been rejected. And I think we need to rediscover this kind of face-to-face spirituality. I believe that, at least in the United States, what we experience for the most part is spectator spirituality. You come into a big room and there's a platform in the front, which is really a stage. There's a worship team that's really a band. There's a congregation that's really an audience. And there's a clergy person who's very often an inspirational speaker. And the question is, does coming in and being part of an audience for a good band and a good inspirational speaker, does this generate the kind of spirituality that the New Testament promises? And I would say no. I would say we need face-to-face spirituality where people discover their gifts. They also unburden their hearts where they're held accountable. Face-to-face spirituality. In fact, John Wesley, who was active in perhaps saving Great Britain, the UK, from the equivalent of the French Revolution, so that when he died, 1 out of 9 members of in his country, the citizens of the country, 1 out of 9 were part of a Wesleyan society. And he would refuse to evangelize unless he could put people in these groups he called classes, which were really home churches. He said, if you don't put them in that kind of a group, they eventually fall faster asleep than they were when you woke them. So I think we need to rediscover what Wesley insisted upon. And renewal and expansion are contagious in contexts where information is easily distributed. Well, welcome to the internet. Renewal and expansion are often seen to have been accompanied by new leadership patterns. And one of the things that Bruce and I really believe in terms of this model is that it's one that values lay participation. It's not the leaders and the led. It is the people of God. So why CHI? There's the acronym. And really, we're looking to form a relational network, not a big shot organization, but a relational network of people who are committed to these kinds of things.